This is Glenn from SimAbility. It's August 2018, and I'm going to talk about our GT paddles for Thrustmaster wheels. These GT paddles are designed to work on the Thrustmaster TX and the Thrustmaster T300 series. They will physically mount on some of the newer wheels, the TSPC, things like that, but those spin so fast when they calibrate that the cord can get tangled up in them, so we don't recommend them on those wheels. But these are primarily designed for the TX and the T300. And the other thing to be aware of is that the wheel that these install on must have the removable threaded part, whatever you want to call it, the adapter. That has to be, you have to be able to remove that from the wheel rim. Now please be aware that on some of the stock TX wheel, the threaded part is not removable. So if you have the stock TX base, then you will need one of the aftermarket wheels. It could be the Ferrari wheel, any of the aftermarket wheels listed on the website where the threaded adapter comes off, because the paddles actually mount, let's get this right, between the wheel and the threaded adapter. That's how they stay on. So what do the paddles do? They provide you with two analog inputs. These aren't digital, these aren't switches, these are analog. And so you have a brake paddle and the gas paddle. And this signal goes back to the Thrustmaster base, and they look just like the Thrustmaster pedals. So if you have a console, PC, whatever it is, when you plug it in, turn it on, the Thrustmaster base is going to think you have Thrustmaster pedals connected. In their stock configuration, we put the brake paddle on the left and the gas paddle on the right, but that can be switched. We do have some customers that prefer the brake on the right, the gas on the left. We can do that. Another feature that we have with these is this mechanism here is what we call it's a kind of a progressive brake rubber, so it gives you extra force on the brake to help keep you from locking the brakes up. It is also adjustable, so you can turn it in or out, but that gives you a stronger feel on the brake. The gas paddle is just a simple spring mechanism. These are somewhat adjustable in the amount of range that you give them. We do put that on there. And the paddle sensors themselves are Hall effect. There's no potentiometers in here to get dirty or wear out. They're magnetic Hall effect sensors. Work very smoothly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cover the installation, how to install these. It's relatively easy, not as easy as the F1 paddles, but it's still fairly easy. And before we get into the installation, just the basic concept of how this works. The paddles themselves will mount to the wheel, and then the paddles plug into what I call a connector box. We actually have a couple different versions of this. This particular one has a port on the back where an additional a clutch or something extra can be plugged into it. The stock one doesn't have that. We also have an option of what I call the switch box. And what this does is, if you are sharing your rig with somebody who uses pedals, you can get the switch box, and it allows you to switch between the hand controls and the pedals. You do have to turn the wheel off, switch, and then you turn the wheel back on. So if you're sharing your setup, this might be a good option. This is new this year, and but if you're interested in this, let me know. So your paddles will connect to a connector box of some sort, and the connector box itself has a cable that connects to the back of the base, right where the foot pedals go in, plug in. So, like I said, your Thrustmaster base will see your paddles as pedals, so it makes it compatible on the console systems or PC. Okay, so let's get into the installation now. Alright, when you receive your paddles, you're going to receive the installation parts along with the Allen wrenches you'll need to put it all together. You're going to receive some cables that will connect your connector box to the Thrustmaster base. You're going to receive what I call a connector box, and that's there's a couple different options. This particular unit is the kind that sticks to the side of the base. Your paddles will plug into one side, and the other side will go to the pedal input on your Thrustmaster base. You're also going to receive our custom shifter paddles. These are our smaller sized carbon fiber shift paddles that you'll replace the stock ones with. These allow more room for the gas and brake paddles. Without these, your gas and brake paddles would have to be a lot smaller. And of course, you'll also receive the actual GT paddle unit. And that's what we're going to install now. Alright, the installation instructions are available on the website. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to simply follow through the installation instructions and do it. The first thing in the instructions, there is a note to regarding the brake rubber. So like I said, by default they're configured for the brake on the left. If you received your paddles and actually want it the other way around, go ahead and make those changes first. Just move this around to the other side and take care of that first. So the first step in the actual the installation is to remove the threaded adapter part. And so all we have to do is take our Allen wrench that's with the red marker, pop these three. And it's going to be those through there. Once those three screws are out, we can carefully pull the threaded adapter out, and then there's going to be a connector in here, and we have to unplug that. We have to unplug that connector. Now, most of the wheels come with a small connector. Some come with a larger connector. If you have the kind with the larger connector, you may not be able to unplug that until you take the paddle assembly off. But most do come with a small connector. It's a little easier to work with. So step 3 is probably the most time-consuming part. We need to remove the housing and the stock paddle shifters. And we do that by removing the, I believe it's 6 screws. And of those 6 screws, the 2 on the ends here are a standard threaded machine screw. Let me tip this over, knock those out. And then the rest are more of a plastic screw. So just keep those straight. And we're just simply going to lift that off. Set the wheel aside for now. And what we need to do now is remove the 4 screws each side for the paddle shift assemblies. I'm just going to do one here. And be aware, there are springs in here, so as you start to take these screws off, it's going to try to spring out on you. So I will hold it down with my thumb. Alright, and we can take that off. Set our 2 springs aside. And there's our stock paddle shifter. And then there's 2 more screws on here we need to remove. I guess I'll just tip this over. Okay, our 2 machine screws, keep our plastic piece. And then you're just going to go ahead and pull the stock shifter out. Take note of your orientation. So this is the part that confuses me sometimes. Right now, I believe we're looking at the top. And we can look at the instructions to make sure we get the orientation correct with the paddles. I have on numerous occasions I have put the paddles on upside down and had to do it over again. So we're going to go and pull this guy out. And then the replacement paddle, we'll just put it in there. Write that correctly. And then the key is that the holes obviously have to line up. We attach our 2 screws holding the paddle shifter plate on. Now before you tighten these, you might want to just take a look and make sure everything looks straight, because if you get it crooked, you could possibly break the assembly when you tighten it up. Just make sure everything looks like it's seated on there properly and nothing's hung up or crooked before you tighten these down. And just give them a little, just snug them down a little bit. They don't have to be super tight. Okay, so once you get those screws in, be sure your assembly it's in its bushing properly. We go and put our springs back on. And the springs go on over these little X's here. And then, I'm trying to hold this so the camera can see it. And then we're just going to put this plate back on. Now be aware that the left and right side are slightly different. There's little keys on here. Just be sure you get the right side on the right side and left side on the left side. Because you'll notice that they are slightly different. Put that on there. I just hold it down with my thumb a bit, and we'll put the 4 screws back in. Alrighty, so we've got all our screws back in, our paddle shifter set up. The paddles should be facing upwards. So let's just make sure we got it right. So if we put the housing on the wheel, we make sure that when the wheel is in the upright position that the paddle shifters are facing up. If you got it like that, then that's wrong. Fix it now. I've done it many a times. So what's next? The next step in the instructions is going to be go ahead and put the housing back on the wheel. And put our 6 screws back in. Let's make sure we've got it seated properly. It's not hung up anywhere because this is plastic. If you tighten it down when it's hung up, it can crack. So remember, our threaded screws, our machine screws go in the 2 holes on the end. And there is room to get the screwdriver in there. If you're having trouble, let me get these tightened. If you are having trouble getting to those screws, what you can do is loosen the paddle shift Allen heads, and then just slide the paddle shift in a bit. You can see those are adjustable. We'll slide it in a bit, makes it easier to get our screwdriver in there. Okay, now we've got our paddle shifting housing on, and we've got the paddle shifters so that they're facing up. So now we need to just actually put our hand controls on. You're going to get a black adapter. If they're not already in there, the white spacers, go ahead and put them in to the adapter. And on the adapter, you'll notice that there is a key slot or key in the top. That lines up with the key on the wheel rim. And when we put this together, we just need to be sure that those line up. So, the other tricky about the paddle shifters are easy to install, they just take some time. The tricky part here is getting the wire plugged back in while you're putting everything together. What I find is it's easiest to go ahead and put the threaded adapter into the wheel first. By the way, the threaded adapter also has a key. The key on the threaded adapter on the stock rim lines up, and that orients your top. Now, on the Thrustmaster paddles, there is no key here. What you have instead are a set of holes, and so you're going to need to line the key up with the top of your paddles. In this case, that's going to be like that. Now I do make, and I do have a few customers who like inverted paddles. So if you want to mount your paddles upside down, or if you have the inverted paddles, then you're going to line the key up 180 degrees out so that the top of the key is facing what I would consider the bottom of the paddles, but it's inverted. And you'll notice you could even install the paddles sideways. You can install them at different angles, but the standard setup is to put the key facing up, and then we just press that in there, and just make sure it's not crooked, but that goes into your paddle assembly. And so now we're going to take this, remember our key, and so we've got our keys facing up, and we've got our tricky little wire we got to plug in. And we'll try to do this without blocking the camera. Although it's pretty much impossible. Let's see. Okay, so I'm able to plug that in. Now if you have the assembly with the large connector, it's probably going to plug in underneath this housing, and so you may have to put it together a little bit differently. You may have to attach the housing to the paddle shifter unit and then reach in and plug it in. It all depends. I just unplugged it. All depends on how your assembly, which plug you have. Let me plug this back in. There we go. Okay, and once you have that plugged in, again, we're going to, I've got them upside down. Okay, again, we're going to line our keys up, make sure that that wire is not caught. And we're going to take the extra long screws, 3 of them, drop them into our wheel, and then not the red one, but the other Allen wrench. Actually, it is the red one. It's the GT rings that use the other Allen wrench. And these are metric screws. The GT rings actually use an American 832 screw in here. Okay, now before I tighten these all the way, I'm just going to take another look and make sure everything looks straight. If I have something crooked, I don't want to tighten it up yet. But everything on this installation looks straight, so I'm going to go ahead and just snug them down a little bit. It's hard to tell how tight to go. You're basically just going to turn until it starts to tighten up. There we go. Once you feel it starts tightening up, go ahead and stop there. You can always tighten these later if you need to. If you don't get them tight enough, after a while the wheels start to get a little loose, and you just go in and tighten them up a little bit. Anyways, that's it for installing the paddles onto the wheel. And then of course these are adjustable, so you can adjust your paddle shifters in or out. Let's go ahead and tighten those up. And the same applies for your gas and brake paddles. Those are adjustable. You can loosen these up and you can slide them in and out a little bit. Everybody seems to be pretty happy with the gap distance here for the paddle shifters, but you could change these spacers and change the distance the paddle shifter is away from the wheel. Okay, so now that we have our paddles installed, the next thing we're going to do is put our connector box onto the base. You don't have to put it on the base. You can put it on your desk or your rig, wherever you want to put it. But we're going to take, and by the way, this is the standard connector box for the F1 and GT paddles. All it has is a connector to connect the hand controls and a connector on the back that goes to the base. It does not have the extra, what we call a clutch connector. We also do make a connector box that has an extra connector where you can connect an aftermarket clutch or even a handbrake, but the clutch would plug in right there. Now, when you have an extra connector for the clutch, you have to shunt it out. You have to basically tell it the clutch is off. So that's what this is. If you have a unit that has the clutch port, you have to have what's called a clutch shunt plugged into it. But we ship, the paddle ship generally without that unit. This, if you have children or something like that, obviously you don't want them taking that out and losing it or swallowing it. But that is a connector that has the extra clutch part. We also have, I think I mentioned it earlier, we also have a box, a switch box. So if you have that unit, it's the same concept that would just sit on your desk. But this particular installation, we just have the stock connector box, and I'm pulling the protector strips off of the two-sided tape, and then we're going to stick it on to the wheelbase. Now, before we stick it on there, be aware that once your cord is plugged in, you do not want the connector box too far or too close to the front, because that exposes your connector. It's possible somebody could hit it, knock it off. You want to bring it in a little bit, and so we're just going to stick it there. Let me unplug that for now. So once we have our connector box attached to the base, then we're going to take this connector. Honestly, I forgot what that's called, but that will plug in to the back of your connector box. There's a little key on this as well. Line that up, plug it in. And then this is going to plug in where your foot pedals go, where the stock Thrustmaster foot pedals go. This connector will plug in, and we've got a little plastic clip that goes in there. Unfortunately, if anything is going to fail, it's probably going to be this little clip, so just be careful when you plug it in. It's clipped in, and if you need to remove it, be sure to get under there and release the clip before you start tugging on it. But if it's, as long as it's clipping in there properly, you're good. If you don't get it clipped in all the way, it just pulls out. And then of course, last of all, you'll just connect your, make sure the wider part is up. Connect our wheel, put the screw in the bottom. You'll notice you have room to get to the screw. Tighten that up, your stock Thrustmaster screw. Plug in, tighten that wheel, and then you're ready to go. Now, when you turn your wheel on, this is going to spin pretty fast, and that cord's going to jump around. So when you turn it on, it's a good idea, just if you're there, just kind of put a little downward pressure on the cord. Keep it from flopping around and getting caught in the paddles. But that is it. That is the installation of the GT paddles. If you have any problems or issues, certainly contact me, let me know. And I hope this video is helpful.